One sentence. Just one. That's all it took to take down a senator who thought they owned the room. The moment was so sharp, so perfectly timed, that the audience didn't just gasp, they erupted. It wasn't a speech, it wasn't a rant, it was a scalpel, not a hammer, and it sliced through the arrogance of the moment like it was nothing. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and the senator stood tall at the podium, exuding the kind of confidence that only comes from years of political combat. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't cautious, he was hungry. Hungry to win, hungry to dominate, hungry to humiliate. The kind of hunger that blinds you to what's really happening around you. He strutted like the room belonged to him, like every word he spoke was destined for the history books. The crowd was restless. Some leaned forward with eager smiles, ready for blood. Others shifted uncomfortably, already sensing the cruelty in his tone. This wasn't leadership, it was a performance, an attack wrapped in a smile. The senator was building up his target, not to elevate them, but to tear them down brick by brick in front of everyone watching. He knew the cameras would eat it up. He knew the evening news would replay his smirk, his swagger, his dominance. Or at least, he thought they would. The speech rolled on, each insult sharper than the last. He called his opponent weak. He painted them as unqualified. He mocked their background, their record, even their demeanor. He raised his voice, pacing, gesturing with broad strokes like a general commanding an army. The audience gave him chuckles here and there, a few scattered claps, but mostly silence. The silence of people waiting, anticipating, wondering. Because no matter how loud someone is, the real drama comes in the response. And that silence, it was dangerous. His opponent didn't interrupt, didn't fidget, didn't even break eye contact. They just waited, letting the senator burn up his own energy, letting him puff up larger and larger until it was almost comical. It was a masterclass in patience, because the louder someone shouts, the easier it is to cut them down with a whisper. And then finally, the senator stopped. A pause, a smug smile, a little shrug that said, "Go ahead, try to match that." What came next wasn't a speech. It wasn't even a comeback in the traditional sense. It was one sentence, calm, clear, precise. The kind of sentence that doesn't just answer, it exposes, like pulling back a curtain and revealing that the mighty wizard is just a man fumbling with levers behind the scenes. The audience froze for half a second, stunned by the clarity of it, and then the reaction exploded. Gasps, laughter, applause. Some people clapped so hard they nearly stood up. Others looked around wide-eyed as if to say, "Did that really just happen?" The senator, usually quick with words, usually fast to pivot, stood there in silence. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down, shuffled papers that didn't need shuffling. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every flicker of discomfort, every second of hesitation. He wasn't a giant anymore. He wasn't commanding. He looked small. That was the beauty of it. Not just the words themselves, but the timing. Because power isn't always about who talks the most. It is about who knows when to strike. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone dig their own grave by talking too much, only to be undone by a single truth dropped at the perfect moment? That's exactly what this was. The senator thought he was building a fortress with his speech, but he was really digging a pit. And that one-liner, that was the shove that sent him tumbling in. The brilliance of the moment wasn't only in what was said, but in what wasn't. His opponent didn't ramble. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't try to match the senator's fire with fire. Instead, they used water. Calm, cool, dousing the flames in a single strike. And that's what made it devastating. The audience reaction wasn't just noise, it was judgment. You could see it in their faces. Respect shifted. Energy shifted. The senator had gone from towering figure to embarrassed man in a matter of seconds. That is the thing about arrogance. It leaves cracks wide enough for the truth to slip through. And the truth hit hard. This was no longer about politics. It was about presence. It was about the way people respond when they realize the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest. That lesson plays out in boardrooms, classrooms, dinner tables. Anywhere people think volume equals victory. But the reality is, when arrogance swells too large, it only takes one pinprick to pop the balloon. The cameras caught every angle. The rival's calm face, the senator's frozen expression, the crowd roaring. Clips would soon flood online. Headlines would buzz, and the senator's carefully cultivated image of dominance shattered in a moment he couldn't take back. That's the kind of political moment that doesn't just fade, it gets replayed, it gets studied, it gets remembered. Because in a sea of long speeches and rehearsed talking points, what people remember most is the raw, unscripted moment that felt real. And this felt real. The senator tried to recover, fumbling for a retort, but the spell was broken. No matter what words he managed afterward, the audience had already chosen the winner of the exchange. You can't unring a bell. You can't erase the sound of an entire room gasping and laughing at your expense. And deep down, he knew it. You could see it in his eyes. That dawning realization that the narrative had slipped out of his hands. This wasn't just a loss. It was exposure. Because when the cameras replayed the clip over and over, it wasn't going to be his 10-minute rant that people remembered. It was going to be the one line. The line that turned him from predator to prey. And here's the thing. Moments like these don't just happen by accident. They're the result of watching, waiting, studying the rhythm of arrogance until the perfect moment arrives. And when that moment comes, when the line lands, the entire dynamic shifts. The senator had been performing. His rival? They were listening. That's the difference. And it's why the roast didn't just sting, it destroyed. This was only the beginning of the unraveling. Because as soon as the crowd reacted, as soon as the senator stumbled, the real storm was set in motion. The media would dissect it, opponents would replay it, supporters would scramble to explain it. And through it all, that one-liner would hang in the air like smoke after a fire. A permanent reminder of how quickly arrogance collapses under the weight of truth. And if you think the line itself was brutal, wait until you see what happened next. The way the media latched onto it, the way it spread like wildfire, the way it chipped away at years of careful image building in a matter of hours. Because this wasn't just a moment on stage, it was a turning point. A mic drop that echoed far beyond the room it happened in. And that's where the real drama begins. But before we move into the fallout, remember this. Power is fragile. Image is fragile. All it takes is one sentence, perfectly timed, to change everything. So buckle up, because the story is only getting started. The senator's smirk had already begun to crack when the one-liner landed, but what followed wasn't just embarrassment, it was collapse in real time. The cameras zoomed in, unforgiving, capturing every twitch of discomfort. The audience's laughter rolled like a wave, the sound bouncing off the walls, drowning out the senator's attempt to regroup. He cleared his throat, shuffled papers, tried to smile as if it didn't matter. But it mattered. Oh, it mattered more than anything he'd said in the last 20 minutes. Because silence in politics is dangerous, and in that moment, his silence said more than his speech ever could. He wasn't in control anymore. He was exposed, standing under the bright lights with nothing to hide behind but the fragments of his dignity. The rival didn't need to say another word. They leaned back, calm, almost serene, as if they knew the damage was complete. That was the brilliance of it, knowing when to stop. Because in a debate, it isn't always the length of the argument that wins. It's the precision of the blow. One strike, perfectly placed, can end the fight before the other side even realizes they're bleeding. And bleed he did. Not visibly, not literally, but reputationally. The crowd had turned. The energy had shifted. The cameras had immortalized his stumble, and from that point forward, everything he said was just filler. His words landed flat, lifeless, powerless in the shadow of that devastating line. The rival didn't gloat, didn't hammer it in. They didn't need to. The crowd was doing it for them, whispering, smirking, exchanging glances that said it all. Did you see that? Did you hear that? That was the moment. The senator tried again, fumbling with a response, forcing a joke. It fell dead. He raised his voice, hoping volume might reclaim authority. It didn't. The audience wasn't with him anymore. Once you lose the room, You don't get it back. Not with desperation. Not with noise. The only thing that could have saved him was time, and time doesn't stop when the cameras are rolling. The moderators exchanged glances. Even they felt the shift. This wasn't the debate they had prepared for. This wasn't the senator towering as usual, commanding, rehearsed. This was a man scrambling, unsteady, trying to outrun the echo of a line that had already gone viral in real time. Because here's the truth. Audiences know authenticity when they see it. They know when someone's been cornered by reality. And in that one sentence, the rival had stripped away the senator's armor. No scripted talking point could rebuild it. No spin could erase the sight of his smirk evaporating into panic. And then came the aftermath. The debate ended. The cameras stopped rolling in the studio, but in the digital world, it was just beginning. Clips flooded onto social media within minutes. That one line, just a handful of words, was cut, clipped, and shared by thousands. Hashtags ignited. Did you see the senator's face? Replay that reaction. This is the mic drop of the year. Millions of views in hours. Commentators weighed in, each dissecting the moment like surgeons hovering over the scene of an operation. Some praised the rival's restraint, others mocked the senator's collapse. Memes sprouted instantly. The smirk frozen mid-frame, the jaw slack in disbelief, the perfect before and after image of arrogance meeting reality. And here it's the thing about the internet. It doesn't care how long you've been in power. It doesn't care about your years of speeches, your carefully polished image, your crafted brand. It cares about the moment, the instant where truth cuts through, raw and undeniable. And this was that instant. The senator's team scrambled. They released statements. They insisted the line was taken out of context, that it wasn't as bad as it looked, but people had seen it. They had felt it. Context didn't matter when the clip itself told the story. The truth is, once a moment goes viral, once the reaction becomes the headline, no amount of spin can erase it. News outlets ran with it. Senator stumbles on stage. One-liner that shook the debate. Power shift in real time. Panel discussions lit up across the networks, replaying the clip again and again. Analysts debated what it meant for the senator's career, for his campaign, for his credibility. But the analysis barely mattered. The audience had already decided. The rival didn't need to gloat because the public was doing it for them. Comments flooded in. Finally, someone shut him down. Best line in political debate history. This should be studied in schools. And for the senator, it wasn't just embarrassment, it was erosion. Because politics runs on perception, and perception can turn faster than a storm. His rivals smelled weakness. His allies went quiet. Silence, after all, is the loudest signal of all. When even your friends stop defending you, the end is near. Think about it. Decades of building a brand, years of speeches, countless campaigns, all chipped away by a single moment. That's the fragility of power. It doesn't erode slowly. Sometimes it crumbles instantly, all at once when the mask slips and people see what's underneath. And what they saw wasn't strength. It was fear. It was uncertainty. It was a man realizing too late that his words had become weapons turned against him. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about human nature, about the way arrogance blinds us, about the way truth can pierce through the thickest armor with barely any effort at all. The senator thought he was untouchable, thought he was immune to humiliation. But no one is. Not when the lights are bright, the cameras are rolling, and the right words land at the right time. The rival became a symbol overnight, not just of clever debate, but of the idea that truth doesn't need volume to be powerful. It just needs precision. That one sentence carried more weight than 1,000 speeches. And people respected that. They shared it because it felt pure, unscripted, undeniable. And here's the haunting part. The senator knew it too. Behind closed doors, reports leaked of his fury, his anger at staff, his disbelief that the narrative had slipped away. He had spent his career controlling the room, controlling the message. But this time, the room controlled him. He had become a meme, a punchline, a lesson in what happens when ego outruns awareness. And that label sticks. The rival, meanwhile, didn't need to do much. They kept quiet, let the moment speak for itself. And it did, louder than any follow-up could have. That restraint only deepened the impact, because while the senator flailed and fought the clip, the rival simply stood back, letting the truth echo. And echo it did. Across the nation, across the world, across every platform where people crave the rare spectacle of power undone by honesty. But what made this moment unforgettable wasn't just the line itself. It was the reaction it unleashed, the way an audience shifted in real time, the way millions at home felt the same gut punch of realization, that the Emperor's clothes weren't tea as fine as he thought. That's why it stuck. That's why it burned into memory. Because moments like these are rare, and when they happen, they remind us all of something deeper, that arrogance always carries the seeds of its own destruction. And for the senator, those seeds had just sprouted. But here's the question. Was this just a stumble, a viral clip that would fade in a week? Or was it something bigger, something that would haunt him forever, rewriting his legacy in real time? That's the cliffhanger. That's the part no one knew yet. What came next wasn't just fallout, it was a reckoning. The fallout didn't wait until morning. By the time the senator's car pulled away from the debate hall, the clip had already carved its place into history. On the sidewalks, journalists pressed their microphones to staffers who shuffled past with stiff smiles, repeating scripted lines about a solid performance and staying on message. But their voices were drowned out by the relentless hum of phones buzzing, feeds refreshing, and headlines that couldn't be stopped. The one-liner had become more than a clever retort. It was a cultural event, a single moment of clarity that sliced through the fog of talking points, rehearsed slogans, and stage theater. People craved authenticity, and they had just been handed a raw, undeniable example. Cable networks couldn't resist. Within an hour, every channel had replayed the clip half a dozen times, slow-motioning the exact second the senator's smirk collapsed into panic. Pundits leaned forward in their chairs, grinning as they analyzed it frame by frame. "Here's where he realizes the crowd isn't with him," one host explained. "Look at the eyes," another insisted, zooming in on the senator's shifting gaze. It wasn't just news, it was entertainment, and audiences devoured it. On social media, the floodgates burst wide open, the hashtags soared. Mic drop moment. Senator exposed. Smirk, to shock. Teenagers, comedians, even celebrities piled in. Late-night hosts teased upcoming monologues with smirking emojis and captions like, "Oh, we're gonna have fun with this one." And yet, while the world laughed, the senator's office went into lockdown. Inside a dimly lit conference room, aides huddled around laptops, voices sharp, tempers snapping. "We need to control the narrative. Get surrogates out there now. Spin this. Call it a cheap shot, a gimmick." But the truth hung heavy in the air. How do you spin something people have already seen with their own eyes? That's the nightmare of the digital age. Once a moment is immortalized in pixels, it's no longer yours to explain. It belongs to the public. And the public had made up its mind. By morning, the front pages confirmed it. Not, "Senator delivers speech on policy." Not, "Rival raises questions about leadership." No, the headline was the line. The one sentence that gutted years of image building. Photographs paired the senator's broken expression with mocking captions. Cartoons exaggerated his smirk, dissolving into shock. Every platform, every outlet, every timeline replayed the humiliation on loop. And what about the rival? They didn't gloat. They didn't do a victory lap. They appeared on a single morning show, calm, collected, offering nothing more than, "I simply told the truth. People can decide for themselves." That restraint only deepened the contrast. One figure looked rattled, defensive, desperate. The other looked composed, above the noise. Hero and villain framed themselves without effort. The senator, however, couldn't escape. At rallies, hecklers shouted the line back at him, their voices slicing through the crowd. Protesters waved signs with his smirk plastered across them, turned into memes larger than life. Every microphone shoved in his face carried the same question. How do you respond to what was said last night? And every answer he gave sounded smaller, weaker, drowned out by the echo of the line itself. Behind closed doors, allies began whispering. Was the senator still viable? Could his campaign survive this kind of blow? Donors hesitated. Strategists hedged. Even longtime supporters avoided eye contact when the clip played in the background of every restaurant, bar, and living room television. Loyalty in politics is brittle, and nothing shatters it faster than the scent of weakness. Think about it. For years he had controlled the stage, the message, the spotlight. He was the smirking heavyweight, untouchable in debates, feared by opponents. And yet in less than 30 seconds, all of that collapsed. That is the fragility of arrogance. It blinds you to the possibility of defeat until the defeat is already here. And the rival? They became more than a debater. They became a symbol. People shared the clip not just because it was entertaining, but because it felt like justice, like truth finally breaking through the static. They projected their own frustrations onto that moment. It wasn't just about the senator anymore. It was about every arrogant figure who thought they could talk their way out of accountability. The internet gave it fuel. TikTok edits layered dramatic music under the clip. Twitter threads broke down the top 10 most brutal political moments of the decade, with this one proudly sitting at number 1. Reaction videos poured in, people screaming, laughing, replaying it again and again. This was more than viral. It was cultural saturation. And here's where it turned darker. The senator's opponents within his own party smelled blood. Subtle comments started appearing. We need leaders who don't get rattled. This race needs a fresh face, not outright betrayal, but the kind of gentle undermining that signals the tide has turned. His base still defended him, yes, but even there, cracks appeared. Why didn't he fight back? Why did he look so weak? That is the cruelty of politics. Supporters love you until the moment they sense you can win. Then they love someone else. The senator lashed out. In interviews, he grew combative, snapping at reporters, rolling his eyes when asked about the line. He accused networks of bias, claimed the clip was overblown, even suggested his opponent had rehearsed it with the press in advance. But the more he fought, the smaller he looked. It wasn't strength anymore. It was desperation. And desperation is poison in politics. The rival, meanwhile, leaned into silence. They didn't need to fight. They didn't need to push. The clip was doing all the work. They gave speeches about dignity, service, truth, never mentioning the senator directly, but always standing in stark contrast to his flailing. And that contrast grew clearer with every passing day. Commentators began to ask the question no one thought possible just weeks before. Was this the beginning of the end for the senator? Could a single moment really undo a career? The answer, increasingly, seemed to be yes, because politics isn't about the quantity of words you speak. It's about the moments that define you. And this moment had defined him, not as the smirking giant he had once been, but as the man whose armor shattered under one sentence. But here's the haunting thought, the one that lingers long after the laughter fades. What if it wasn't just about the senator? What if this was a glimpse into something bigger, about how truth works, about how arrogance always carries the seeds of its own downfall? Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to ramble. Sometimes it just waits for the perfect moment to strike, and when it does, it doesn't just win the argument. It rewrites the story, and that's exactly what was happening here. The storm didn't fade. It transformed. Weeks after the debate, the senator's name still trended, but not for the reasons he wanted. He gave speeches on policy, held town halls, announced initiatives. None of it mattered. Every microphone shoved in front of him carried the same invisible caption, the one-liner. No words could erase it. No gesture could undo the memory. That's the curse of the viral age. You don't control your legacy anymore. One moment can outweigh a lifetime. And for the senator, that moment was burned into the collective imagination. But here's the twist. Something even the rival didn't expect. That brutal one-liner became more than just a jab. It sparked a movement. Across campuses, coffee shops, and offices, people repeated it, not as a joke, but as a mantra. It became shorthand for calling out dishonesty, arrogance, hypocrisy. The rival hadn't just dismantled one man's argument. They had given the public a weapon, words sharp enough to cut through noise. Think about the irony. The senator had built his career on controlling narratives, bending stories, shaping perception. And yet, in the end, the story that defined him wasn't written by him. It was written in the audience's laughter, the rival's calm delivery, the silence that followed before the eruption of applause. A silence that carried more weight than any of his speeches ever had. The fallout reached beyond politics. Media outlets wrote think pieces about the power of brevity in an age of excess. Professors used the clip in communication classes as proof that clarity crushes complexity. Even corporate leaders quoted the line in boardrooms, reminding their teams that honesty cuts deeper than polished spin. What started as a debate moment became a cultural parable, and yet, in the senator's inner circle, denial persisted. Staffers still worked overtime to reshape his image, drowning reporters in press releases, trying to bury the clip beneath an avalanche of new content. But here's the truth. Once the people smell weakness, no amount of noise can cover it. Every attempt to distract only reminded them of what they were trying to erase. Supporters grew restless. Volunteers stopped showing up. Donors hesitated. In politics, money and manpower are oxygen, and suddenly, his campaign was gasping for air. Allies who once praised him in public shifted to lukewarm comments, hedging their bets in case his career collapsed entirely. One by one, doors closed. And the rival? They didn't need to fight anymore. They let silence work in their favor. Every rally they held, every speech they gave, the energy was electric. Crowds didn't just show up to listen. They showed up to witness. Witness a figure who had stood tall, spoken truth, and survived the kind of test that destroys most careers. In their eyes, this wasn't just a politician. This was someone who embodied resilience. But let's pause here. Because the story isn't just about two individuals locked in a battle. It's about us, about the audience. Why did the moment resonate so deeply? Why did millions share it, laugh at it, quote it, tattoo it into the culture? The answer is simple. Because it gave people what they were starving for. Authenticity. We live in an age where spin is everywhere. Politicians, corporations, influencers, they flood us with crafted words, perfectly packaged messages. But every now and then, someone breaks through. Someone drops the act, slices through the fog, and delivers something so sharp, so true, that it wakes us up. That's what happened that night. That's why it stuck. And for the senator, that was the end. Not in a dramatic resignation, not in a sudden collapse, but in something quieter. A slow fade. The smirk that once commanded rooms now looked hollow. The speeches that once electrified crowds now landed with thuds. He hadn't just lost a debate. He had lost his aura. And once that aura is gone, there's no getting it back. But let's not forget the rival. Their career soared, yes, but more importantly, their moment became a reminder that words still matter, that truth, delivered with precision, can topple arrogance no matter how towering it seems, that sometimes the smallest sentences carry the loudest echoes. And here's the lesson for all of us. Maybe you're not a politician, maybe you're not standing on a debate stage, but in your own life you'll face arrogance, you'll face spin, you'll face people who think they can overwhelm you with noise, with bluster, with intimidation. And when that moment comes, remember this. You don't need to match their volume. You don't need to play their game. All you need is clarity. All you need is truth, sharpened to a point and delivered with calm confidence. That's what wins. Not the loudest voice, not the flashiest speech, but the truth. Clean, undeniable, unstoppable. The senator's downfall wasn't just a political event. It was a universal story. The story of hubris meeting reality, of arrogance collapsing under the weight of authenticity. A story as old as history itself, yet brand new in the way it played out across screens, feeds, and timelines. And the lesson is timeless. If you build your power on spin, one line of truth can bring it all crashing down. So, the next time you watch someone smirk their way through lies, the next time you hear a figure dodge, deflect, and deceive, remember the rival. Remember the silence before the crowd roared. Remember the one-liner that cut deeper than 1,000 speeches. And remember this, arrogance always looks invincible, until it isn't, because in the end, truth doesn't just win the argument, truth rewrites the story. And now it's in your hands. If this moment moved you, if it made you think about power, arrogance, and the way truth can change everything, don't just let it fade. Share it. Talk about it. Subscribe, because more stories like this deserve to be told. And together, we can keep holding arrogance to the fire. This isn't just entertainment, it's a reminder. A reminder that even in the noisiest world, the right words, spoken at the right time, can still change everything.